We'll start the work session. We'll go around the table. Mr. Holman, starting with you.
Paul Holman in Anchorage Assembly.
Duke Train Anchorage Assembly.
Ellie Gray Jackson.
Tim Steele.
Jennifer Johnston.
Adam Trombley.
Hunter Peloton Group.
Gail Turner, IT Deputy Director.
Lance, are you going to speak at all?
No, actually, I think they're
Okay.
going to open the presentation.
Lucinda, are you? Nancy? Okay. All right. Floor's yours.
Hello. So the Assembly asked us to meet monthly to give you an update on the SAP project. I'm Gail Turner. I'm the Deputy Director of IT and also Project Manager for the MOA on this project. And Wade is the Peloton Project Manager. So we have a presentation for you today. What we're going to go over is recent accomplishments, what we've been up to. I'd like to let you know what we've accomplished to this point. Give you a little bit of status on the project, where we're at. Talk about some of the risks that we're managing. Give you an idea of some of the things that you're going to see that we need to have approved in support of the project. And then show you what the budget is and where we're at with the As you see, the good news is we're agreeing on schedule, scope, and we're within budget at this point in the project. So I'm happy to report that. And that we have sufficient contingency in the schedule to allow MOA and Peloton to manage all known project plan tasks at this point in time.
Excuse me. If you're within costs on the budget, is that after the approved adjustments we've made at the Assembly level?
Correct? Yes, sir.
Gail and I are going to hand it back and forth today just to mix it up a little bit, but we did want to talk about some of the recent accomplishments that have happened over the last month and a half that the project team's been working on. So we're going to go through a few bullet points. One of the really important things was what we call the restructuring of the project teams and leadership. We have had a specific effort to reorganize the project a little bit differently in how it was managed. Gail and I, managing what we call the PMO, the Project Management Office, have put different structures in place where we have process area leads, where we have specific MOA owners responsible for specific areas with consultants working with them. And we have a team structure that's now working in a very organized way, the way they communicate, the way they report status, and the way they roll things up through the PMO. It's a significantly different organization and structure than from what we witnessed was in place before. And we're seeing a lot of benefits of that organized management structure for just managing tasks, managing issues, and communicating and coordinating. That's one of the primary accomplishments that we tackled right away, starting the project.
What's the size of your staff?
About 22 consultants on the Peloton side.
Are they all consultants not working for the company directly? Because I'm sure you guys have consultants on staff. I'm trying to figure out how you're organized.
We really don't make a distinguishment, to be honest. We have a mixture of different types of either employees or contractors, but they're all homogeneous. They're part of the team working together.
And the total is 22? Thank you, sir.
For the record, Ms. Dombrowski shows up, is present.
So the next bullet point, we do have the consulting group fully staffed at this point and have, I'll say, execute a lot of the adjustments to the MOA staffing as well that we had advised, and that's coming together. One of the things that we wanted to highlight as a major accomplishment is what we call business process documentation. The team has spent a lot of time over the last 6 weeks mapping out what the new processes are going to be for the unit in an SAP environment. And what that means is that it's not just where there's an SAP transaction, it's the whole flow so that people know how to do their jobs. How do they hand off from one area to another? How does that SAP transaction fit in with all the other tasks that are required? For example, to actually procure something, it's more than just one box on a page, it's several boxes. And to know how to execute that flow is one of the key elements of getting up and running with the system. And we found that needed some attention. Gail has an example here that it helps to explain what we're talking about. This is what we call the before example, and this happens to be the invoicing process for purchase orders. And what we wanted to show you is this is kind of where we were starting from, and this type of flow wasn't really adequate to train somebody from. It wasn't adequate to show somebody really how to use the system, where their role fit in, and even where the SAP transactions are. It doesn't show the inputs to the process, the outputs to the process. So what your project team has done over the last month and a half is this level of detail. And I know this looks like there's a lot here, we don't want to go into all the boxes, but what this does is it shows all the decision points, it shows all the SAP transactions, it shows all the inputs and outputs, it shows where there's interfaces linking into this. And the next sheet we had as another example is, this is what we call a blocked invoice analysis. We didn't only show them how to process an invoice, but we show them what happens if it can't be paid because there's no good receipt or something like that. How do they clear up those issues? So this is just as an example of the level of detail the project team is going into now. Okay.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wait, I just have one quick question so I can understand. The process flow documents before, okay? When you're talking about before, you mean before your company took over? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's one of the major accomplishments for the teams and where they're actually gaining some momentum, and we're trying to celebrate those sorts of accomplishments. This was a big effort. There's over 105 of those critical process flows that the team has mapped to that level of detail in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, and then we've expanded what we call the senior leadership group. The project has always had a senior leadership group. In the past, it was focused on better coordination between the larger business units, that stakeholders. But at this point in the project, we've expanded that, and its focus is really outward to the departments. So we've brought in key leadership from each of the larger departments, and our focus is business readiness. And when I say business readiness, that kind of launches into the next bullet there. Business readiness really is, are the departments ready? Do they understand the changes and the impacts of the change, how it affects people's jobs, and are the users trained, and is the training effective? So we're using this group to make sure that, one, we have the right people in place to make sure those things happen, that when we schedule training, people get signed up for it. So business readiness is key. We've always known it's key to the success of the project, and we're now at the point where we can start to look outward and manage that.
The next bullet, we just wanted to talk about this quickly. It was what we call a rebuilt or stabilized test environment. What we did find is it's very important to have a stable environment to do testing in. In other words, if the environment isn't good, it doesn't matter how much testing you do, you'll never be confident that you really tested it properly. And we found that we really need to rebuild those environments and make them solid, bring them up to date, make sure they had all of the current configurations and functionality. So that's one of the tasks that's been done over the last 6 weeks as well. These environments have been completely rebuilt so that the team can have confidence in testing them. And the other bullet that we mentioned that the team has worked on is the security design. What this means in SAP is, in order to do a transaction in SAP, you have to have a role that allows you to do these certain tasks. If I'm that invoice processor, in order to post an invoice in SAP, I have to have authorization to do it. And if I'm not supposed to do it, I shouldn't be able to do it when I try. What we found is that going through a full review of all the security roles and doing updates with all the teams, especially in light of doing these process flows. So having these process flows mapped out, which shows who performs every task, allowed the team to look at the security again and make a lot of updates and get it ready for testing. So we found by doing those process flows, it really helped facilitate a lot of things to get them accurate, including the security designs. So that's another thing that the team has done over the last 6 weeks.
And now the last bullet is we've organized a move back to City Hall. That will be happening over the weekend. So we'll have people moving the furniture and things so that people will be in place here in City Hall on Monday. You probably heard a big cheer from the fire department. No, just kidding.
So you'll be completely out of their
We'll
facility?
be completely out of their facility and doing a walkthrough with them to turn it back over next week. But we thought it was important to move back here as we get closer to go live. We would want to be operating out of here anyway for support purposes, so it's a good time to have the disruption around the holidays. And we just feel like there's more facilities to meet here as well. And so at this point in the project, we have a lot going on, and the meetings where we were hampered by the number of conference rooms we had over there.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Ms. Turner just answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
So that last slide was just designed to highlight some of the major accomplishments, all the things the team has been working on for the last 6 weeks. What we want to present now, it's really just a dashboard format. We're using it for our project status reporting on a weekly basis. A lot of the items you see here we've talked about as the accomplishments. It's what we've been doing for the last few weeks in this period of time. Basically, our scheme is if it's on track, it's a light green. If it's already complete, it's a dark green. If we think it needs some attention, we mark it as a yellow right away. In other words, if we think anything is just slightly off our plan, we mark it as a yellow and then put a plan around it to manage it. So for example, on the first yellow that you see here, this was what we called open project issues that require business decisions or design decisions. And our approach was, let's put every single thing on the table so we can manage it. And we did that right up front. And we've been working through those issues. Currently, we have 12 open business decisions and 27 open kind of, I'll call them like design or testing effort decisions. An example of an open business decision is something such as, one of those open items is who is allowed to retire an asset in the city. For example, there's an open question that came out of the process flow mapping. Is should the asset custodian do it or should the central financial group do it? And so that's something that we're working with Tom and with Lucinda to make those decisions right now. But that's a good example of something that came out of the process flow mapping where the team said, you know, we really need to make a decision who's going to actually do this retirement in the system because there's some segregation of duties issues around it. So that's the type of thing that's been identified as an example of one of the 12 business decisions. And what we've done on the business decisions with the help of Lucinda and Nancy and Tom and others is they help us every week now to review those decisions, and if we need help making a policy or a final decision, that gets accelerated that way. The 27 open issues, I'll stick with the fixed asset theme as an example. Anywhere where there's something that still needed to be updated or changed in the system before we go back and completely test the system. An example here on the fixed assets was AWU was still making some adjustments to their fixed asset classes. So in the system, they classify all their assets differently. So we left that as an open issue until that's completed. And the whole team is focusing on closing these right now. So it's just the way we're putting everything on the table and tracking it. The reason we called this one as a yellow is because we really wanted to have those all completed by 12/6. We really have till 12/27 on this, but the way that we're managing it is if it's off what we originally intended, we show it as a yellow until it's back on track. And we just come up with a plan. In this case, it was getting some more executive sponsor support to help us make these decisions. So I think one of the messages that Gail and I both have is the way that we're managing is that we want this to be very transparent, and as soon as there's something that we don't think is right on track, we're going to mark it as a yellow right away, because that's how we put it on the table we're managing.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number 2, critical project issues, was supposed to be finished December 6th, behind schedule. Do you have any idea when it may be finished? Rough.
12/27 is the date that we're targeting of all these wrapped up, because we want to have them finished before we go back into integration testing. We'd actually set that deadline earlier just to give us an earlier deadline to put some pressure on it. So now we're working to make sure they're all finished by the 27th. But instead of just changing the date and showing it as green, we'd rather just show it as yellow, that we're off what we originally planned, so we put more attention on it.
Which I appreciate. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And the other item that we had as a yellow that we just wanted to mention is, when we say HCM, when you see that, it really means HR payroll. It stands for Human Capital Management and SAP, but it's your HR and payroll data. This is an effort that you may recall we talked about earlier. It's doing a test conversion of all that HR payroll data. Is really, really critical to do that right. To go forwards with testing and not have done that is not a stable way of doing it.
Since you're on HR payroll, I'm hearing rumors that we may have some people delayed up to a year on back pay. Have you guys run into that? Run into that problem with pay not being given to our employees?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. I'll get with HR then. Thank you.
The message that we wanted to send here was that we had planned to do 2 cycles of this test conversion of all the HR and payroll data by 12/27. They're still wrapping up the first cycle right now, which is about a week and a half later than when we intended them to wrap it up. So that's why we're showing this one as yellow right now, and we have a contingency plan in place to add more resources to catch it up by the 27th. But again, this is another one of those activities that we'd rather show it as a yellow and talk about what we're doing to put extra resources on it than just show it as a green.
Ms. Johnson?
So when you're writing the testing for this, do you include HR with, so you have all the different, I mean, I know that we have 120 different payroll. So you're testing all of the different aspects, the different variations, different
One of the things I'll say, I'll let Gail chime in on this one, but this is very, very thorough testing. And it's not only testing all of the HR and payroll data to make a payroll work, it's all of the HR data we're testing now. We're taking every single bit of data from PeopleSoft that needs to be loaded and testing those loads in a very thorough validation way. You know,
Yeah, I guess what I'd like to say is, this wasn't done to this level in the past, and it's the reason we couldn't get anywhere. The
So that's
data-
nothing to compare it to.
Yeah, I mean, this is so important, and the team understands how important this is, that spending the time here now gains us the efficiencies we did not have in the past. So we really believe in this process, and we understand why it's taken so long, but it's really about making sure the data going in is good, and so that the testing is valid.
So again, we're still planning on staying on 12/27 with that task, and we have plans in place, but because the first cycle was a little bit later than we thought, we'll mark it as yellow until we show it's back on track. Okay.
So here we're showing the risk with any big project. You maintain a risk log. So Wade and I sat down with the team, team leads, and we identified areas where we might have risk. You'll see that we have 3 that we have scored as high, and it doesn't mean that those things are impacting the project. It means they're higher potential to impact the project. So we want to be honest and score those so that we're managing them tightly, and that's exactly what we're doing. Is making sure that we understand that these things could impact the project, and if we see that there's any potential to do that, we sit down and we work on mitigation. The 3 areas that we're showing that are high risk to the project, one is the potential for resources, MOA resourcing. There's a lot going on in the city, and we want to make sure that the people that we need on the project are working on the project. So when we see any contention for those resources, and we're working with the controller, with Nancy, with whomever, to say, to make sure that that doesn't impact the project. The second one is MOA Chronos. The MOA Chronos system, because SAP changes the account structure, the MOA Chronos system has to be configured differently. So we have a whole other instance of Chronos that we have to prepare and test with the system. So that within itself is a huge effort that's being managed by a project manager. Mr. Norman?
We can go through the chair, I'm sorry, you can
Okay.
finish. It's fine. You want to interrupt you, fine, go ahead.
Okay. I was just talking about Chronos, that it's a project within itself, and what we're doing is having tight coordination with that project to make sure that they meet the timelines and they come out on their end where we need them to, when we need them to test the system appropriately. The third is MLP also has an instance of Chronos, which it's a smaller configuration, but they're also going through an upgrade of the software, which potentially creates risk because there's always unknown issues with software upgrades. So we want to keep a tight coordination with them as they go through that to make sure that they're not hitting any issues that create schedule issues for us.
Mr. Owen?
So, and I'm guessing it's from this perspective that I'm asking the question from either the project managers here. Is either of these challenges in this particular page driving the issue that apparently has been projected for sometime in the spring for employees having a week delay and not getting paid for 1 week of work or something that's causing some angst? Is it because of these challenges or matching up with Chronos with SAP?
No, that isn't a slide that we're going to talk about later. But
Look, I can wait till later then.
Yeah, we also are showing some medium risk just because although we think the impact is lower, we're basically controlling scope through a process. No new scope can be entered into the project without going through a process of approval, and we're managing that very tightly because we have a lot of work to do. SAP design changes resulting from current unknown labor negotiation changes. So we realize that the city has to move forward. So there's negotiations going on, things coming out of those could impact the configuration. We are not aware of any at this point that do, but we want to make sure that we have coordination and know as soon as anybody knows if there are impacts to the project. And then organizational changes after the SAP HCM parallel testing has commenced. So that's really about a point in time we're going to need to freeze the organization to really be able to test SAP. So we need to make sure that on the production side, there's an understanding that we can't continually change the organization at some point before we go live. And we'll be coordinating with Nancy on that as well. Any questions on the risk slide? Assembly actions. We wanted you to be aware of some things that we'll be sending forward, and this is kind of as a result of, we need to extend some of our contracts to get to July, and that's mainly what you see here. There's some performance testing software as a service that we'll be looking to purchase to help us test the system to make sure when we go live it'll handle the load expected and perform adequately. And then licensing, we're looking at, as we've configured the system and figured out who needs to do what in the system, we didn't know that when we bought the licenses because we bought that up front. So there'll be likely some adjustments to the number of licenses that we need to be within compliance with the software.
That's great, Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Turner, quick question. The upcoming contracts, are they going to be paid for out of the $7.5 million that my colleagues already approved?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Harmon?
The SAP licensing, you're thinking we might have to pay for more. Is that also budgeted for, and how much are we looking at?
We really don't know. I'm doing an assessment now and should know in the next couple of months, how much. We'll know what we think we need and then how much it costs us is a process of negotiation with SAP.
So the question that I asked one of my colleagues in here was, if we're having to pay for more licenses, do you know how much we're paying per license now?
I don't. I could get you that answer of what we paid initially.
Sure. And if we had to go back and pay for more, do we have room to negotiate and have to pay that, or is it a flat fee?
There is room for negotiation, always, and sometimes it depends on when you purchase the software. And what we bought initially were full-blown licenses. I believe 240 is the number. What we would anticipate is, now we know how many people need to access reporting or how many people need to approve workflow. Those are limited licenses, which would cost less. Personnel rules, CBAs, and pay date changed. I believe this may be what you were asking about. There will be some personnel rule changes coming before the assembly. And of course, we know that we're in the middle of negotiating CBAs, and then there's a pay date issue.
Mr. Harmon?
Reference the pay date issue, and I don't know who to direct this to. I'm not interested if we're trying to short someone pay. If we have to change a date, I think everybody can understand maybe a reasoning to change it from a Friday to a Wednesday or from Friday to the following Friday. But you pay them 1 week and then the next week you pay them for 3. I mean, I don't care how you make it up, but shorting somebody a week's salary for the full year, I don't know who to direct that to, but I'd be willing to pass a resolution.
That's right there, she's raising her hand.
Oh, let me say.
Have you back here because you'll actually tell us. We might agree with you, but you'll
Yeah,
tell us.
essentially, this is, right now, people get paid on Friday for the pay period that closes the previous Sunday. So there are 5 days that we process payroll. With this new system, and I don't know all the technical stuff, I'm not a technical person, but the whole payroll will go directly into the general ledger, and it requires a little more time to verify and to be sure that it's accurate. And I might add parenthetically that only having this 5-day window to process payroll now results in a lot of pay errors, and it's just extra work all the way around. So what we're doing is, instead of having pay period close on Sunday, pay them Friday, we're going to be paying them the following Friday for the 2-week period. In order to make that adjustment, and I can tell you, I've been through this twice with companies that I've been with because of system changes. We'll still be paying them every other week, but there will be one pay period where 1 week's pay will be deferred to get on to the new schedule.
So they get paid for 3 weeks?
No, they get paid for 2, they get paid for 1 week, and then they start getting paid for 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. So it just gets it on a new cycle. as a practical matter, I mean, you know, you can't hide this. Are employees going to get paid for only 1 week, for 1 week, for one pay period? The answer to that is yes. We have a list of about a half a dozen things that we're doing to try and ease the burden, allowing additional leave cash-ins. We're not taking their benefit deductions. We're letting them accrue leave for the period, for the full 2-week period. And we are having meetings with the unions to talk about other ways that we might be able to provide assistance for those employees that particularly are going to have a hard time bridging the gap. Once it's there, nobody loses any pay. You know, for example, I was having this conversation with Dennis from IBEW yesterday. For example, the pay period where employees get paid on January 3rd is for December.
Correct.
And this year, because of the way the paydays fall, the pay period on January 13th also includes hours from December. All this is doing, I mean, we still accrue the payroll all in the same year. It's just a defer of when you get paid for the hours. Yes, they're going to get paid for 1 week. They're not losing it. It's recaptured later.
Well, and that's the confusion, and I'm sorry for I just need
That's
to
okay.
get clarification.
That's okay. It is.
I'm not interested in, if someone works for a week
Right.
and you decide that you're going to pay them for 2 weeks, the next pay period, then you pay them for the week, then you pick up the next 2 weeks in the next pay period, whatever date you decide to change. But if they've worked for 2 weeks and you're only going to pay them for a week because you're changing the pay calculations, there's where you have the issue. And that's what I'm trying to get at. My resolution will be that does not happen. And I don't know how we make it happen, if it's a system that we're trying to make work, or if we're trying to work within the system that we have. And so I want to make sure I'm very clear here. If someone works for 2 weeks and you're only intending on paying them a week because we decide to change the pay date and to have extra time to calculate the pay, then that's us trying to make the system work. So what I'm asking is that we make the system work for us. And that has to be done.
The employees will get paid for every single hour that they work. They're not being shorted pay.
So what I think I'm hearing is, if they work a week, they get paid a week. If they work 2 weeks, they get paid 2 weeks. Am I hearing that? Correct.
Right.
I don't want somebody to be
It's-
having work 80 hours and only get paid 40 because we decided to change the cycle.
We're out of time. We're
I
out of time,
understand.
so that's, and I do have some other questions. I have Ms. Gray Jackson, and for the record, Nancy, if you could state your name.
Oh,
and
sorry,
position.
Nancy Ucera, acting ER director.
Okay, Ms. Gray Jackson?
I'm going to yield to Mr. Sherry.
Nancy, do they have to come to Assembly
And
to
then come back.
institute this, or do
Mine
you
is
guys
quick.
have the authority to institute on your own?
We,
So the Assembly has no role to play in this, is my question to you.
that's correct, it's just an
That
administrative
answered the question I
adjustment.
wanted. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
Ms. Gray
Thank you,
Jackson?
Mr. Chairman. Just
That's my understanding.
really quick, Nancy, how does this affect your deferred compensation contributions?
Not at all.
Not at all?
No.
Okay.
There will be, now, it doesn't change it at all. You're going to get the same deferred compensation that you would year over year,
Well,
okay?
no, I think you may not be understanding, okay? Your contribution to your deferred compensation.
Right,
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about, because there's a contribution every pay period.
there is a
Okay?
contribution every
So
pay
because
period.
of the 1 week issue, how is that, is it gonna affect that?
You mean like to your 401K or your
Yeah,
457?
yeah.
Let me double check on that. I don't believe that there's going to be an impact because they're going to pick it up the next pay period.
I just want to make sure, because on
Sure.
a personal note, there were a couple issues with my deferred compensation contribution twice.
Yeah, I'll be happy to look
Yeah,
into it
and
and
I'm
I'll
sure
get
I'm
back
not
to
the
all
only
of
one
you.
that has
Sure.
had issues or potential issues because of this. And if you can just let me know, I
You
really
bet,
would
be happy
appreciate it.
to, sure.
I just
Thank
want
you,
to let
Mr.
everybody
Chairman.
know that we're only scheduled to 1 o'clock on this, so I'll extend 10 more minutes.
Thank
And then, Mr. Steele, and I don't want to take up all the time with this issue. We can have this discussion another time. Is this on this issue?
Yeah, it is, but it's a pointed question,
Okay.
hopefully it can be answered quickly. The purpose of this system is to gain efficiencies, and I can understand that. But we're lengthening the time that it takes to process the payroll, and therefore, is there an alternate, is there savings? Are we cutting back on the personnel, the timekeepers, or something to offset that? what are we gaining by that extra
Yeah,
week?
what we're gaining is with SAP, when we post payroll, we're posting real time directly into the general ledger. So we're moving what today is a lot of back office. After payroll,
After
we
the
post the
fact.
payroll.
I got you.
So now we're going to be posting it all at the same time, because one of the huge benefits of SAP is it's real time, everything.
So how are you using the extra people? I mean, because theoretically, they're doing it now, they're just doing it behind the times. They're still,
Well, that will all be determined by specific position and based on those process flow diagrams that you saw,
Okay.
because some will be more
I just
efficient.
wondered if there was any
Yeah,
labor
we don't
savings.
know, we don't have anything specific yet on that.
Mr. Training, I hope we can
Just-
move past this.
Where are we at on the total cost of this? Is this still gonna be within the $27 million?
Yeah, we've got, go to the next slide. We've spent 12
Because
million
when I
out
see
of
31 at the
22.
bottom, it concerns me, because I think we only approved 27, didn't we?
This is the number that was approved,
The 31 was approved?
yes.
Okay. That'll be the total cost for SAP?
And you know why you're probably remembering the 27 is because in the budget that you just approved in November, there was an approval for the funding for the labor. There was no change in the external costs. It was just the recognition that we would be moving money from operating to capital.
So
in
the total cost is
2014.
gonna, at the 31.6?
If, including the labor, yeah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So two other bullets, we're expecting to see, present some Unicode changes to you that come out of the policy updates that we feel we need to do for the changes that SAP brings in policies and procedures. So we will be, I think we're gonna plan to put together a package hopefully and present those to you as at one time. In the budget, this basically represents what's been approved and where we are today.
Is that it? Are there any other questions? Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No question. I just wanted to say I really appreciate the fact that, actually based on a request I had months ago, that the cost includes downstream costs at MOA, WW, and MLMP, AWW, and MLMP. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And we are adjourned. Thank you.